What role does our brain play in reading comprehension? Our brain plays an essential role in reading comprehension because when we first start reading, our brains are analyzing instantly without us even having to try phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. This is a part of our brain that is able to recognize words right away without having to work towards it. Then we have our language, a part of our brain that handles the language comprehension piece of it, and that is our background knowledge, our language structure, our literacy knowledge, and our vocabulary knowledge. All of these, our word recognition and our language comprehension, both are woven together to make a skilled reader. And also, we have our executive functioning skills happening in our brain that help us to become better readers. So when we're reading, we use our cognitive flexibility. And this is the ability to be able to shift our attention from one concept to another concept. Even it's having the ability to think of multiple concepts simultaneously. This is our cognitive flexibility. The next executive functioning skill is our working memory. So with working memory, it's the ability to hold information that we just obtained in our brain while absorbing new information and linking the information together and creating connections in our brain. And lastly is our inhibition. So our inhibition is our ability to sit down and actually finish a task and set a purpose for what we're reading, or the ability to kind of block out any distractions that are around us. So our brain can work through word recognition and language comprehension, also our executive functioning skills. Second question, how do we teach students to comprehend what they are reading? One of the most important things that stood out to me from this semester is that the most robust instruction does not come from a teacher's manual. It comes from the teacher's skills in teaching about metacognition, about activating prior knowledge within their students, teaching their students strategies to become active readers, and also playing in to developing students' motivation to read. There is a theoretical model called the Good Comprehender model that I learned about in building comprehension in every classroom. And in this model, it says that good readers are knowledgeable, strategic, metacognitive, and motivated. So before I took this course, I thought that mostly all you had to do was teach about reading strategies to students and that they would just get it. But that is not what you have to do. In order to teach reading comprehension to students, you have to basically let them into your brain. You're going to want, when you're reading in a group setting, you're going to want to stop and say, I was just reading this, but this doesn't make sense to me. Or I noticed that my mind was wandering. So let's go back and let's reread it. That was a clunk, and we have to make our clunks into clicks. And that's called a think aloud. It's different than modeling. A think aloud is you are literally walking the students through your thoughts in your brain. They should be able to see if you maybe let your mind drift, that you are metacognitively aware of where your brain is. Is your brain in the text or is it not in the text? Because if it's not in the text, we need to reread and tell them that that is normal, that it happens sometimes, that we lose our train of thought or our attention drifts. However, being aware of this is what makes a good reader. Good readers are knowledgeable, so they have the vocabulary to access the text, which I learned that vocabulary instruction is critical to reading comprehension. Actually, in the good building comprehension in every classroom says that vocabulary makes up 35% of reading comprehension, and that a robust vocabulary instruction is very important to helping students who are struggling with reading catch up. It's the only way is by hitting vocabulary and teaching it, and teaching vocabulary in meaningful contexts where they would have repeated exposure to words. Also, back to the good comprehender model, good readers are strategic. They know how to question the text, how to make connections to the text. They know how to visualize what's happening. They know how to ask questions. They know how to predict what's going to happen and also synthesize the information that they just read. And lastly, good readers are motivated. So an important quote that stood out to me was that comprehension of challenging texts seems to require not only cognition, but also motivation. So we have to be motivated to read, and we have to have a purpose to read. So setting goals for ourselves before we start reading, or setting things that we want to learn from the text, is very important for motivation and motivating students to read, and really for them to see the purpose of why we're reading and why it's important. The last question that we're going to be talking about is, how do students comprehend word and world? So what this means is, how do we make sure that children are taking what they've learned from the text, and how are we relating these to real world experiences or real world knowledge that the students will use in the real world, and that we can make sure that they understand and they remember what we're teaching them for opportunities for them to be knowledgeable in the real world. One of the most important things that we can do as educators is to build background knowledge. Willingham says 3 factors are important in reading comprehension: monitoring your comprehension, relating the sentences to one another, and relating the sentences to things you already know. So if we are learning about dogs, what do the students already know about dogs? And really tapping into past experiences that they've had, things that they've learned from other texts, and allowing the students to discuss what the connections that they have between what they're about to read about, what you're teaching about, and their own personal connections and experiences that they have to this knowledge, to this content that you're going to be teaching. So one of the other things that I really stood out to me is that I always thought that we had to activate prior knowledge by like kind of front loading information, and that's really not what you're supposed to do. Even having meaningful conversations with your students about what they already know instead of you giving the information, just facilitating the conversation between the students can really help the students, one, be motivated to learn more. You get to know your students better, they get to know each other better and if one student knows, well, he has this knowledge and I don't, I want to learn more about it as well. Also, in this course, it talks about how prior knowledge is really the foundation of comprehension. And often students are asked to read texts that they don't know about. And so it's harder for them to access deeper levels of knowledge when they don't know a lot of background information. For example, if you're teaching about the Civil War, a lot of the students, or you're going to read the Gettysburg Address. It's important to give the background to that event happening so students can understand that address deeper and better. And then also exposing students to a wide variety of texts, making sure that they have the skills and strategies, they know what to use. Okay, because every text you read differently. So I'm reading informational text. What strategies do I have in my skill set that I can access this information? What strategies do I know? Okay, if I'm reading informational text, I know that I'm going to be looking for text features such as illustrations, captions, graphs, maps maybe. Teaching students how to access different varieties of text is very important to make sure that they can comprehend between word and world. And also, of course, having a robust vocabulary routine helps them to better comprehend text and use the knowledge that they're learning about in the world.